Good afternoon, everyone. Let's start with a new topic demographic theories, biological, social, and cultural. So, demography, in its literal definition, it is the scientific study of human population. So, via scientific studies, it studies many characteristics of human population, such as their size, structure, and distribution. And in anthropology, studying this population, it helps us understand family systems, reproduction, gender roles, and social traditions that vary across different cultures. Now, the first theory, Malthusian theory of population. So, this biological theory was given by Thomas Robert Malthus, and he believed that if human population kept growing without any control, they would overtake the resources. And he has given here that population increased geometrically in exponential manner, like 2 will be followed by multiple of 2, that is 4, then 8, then 16, all are in factor of 2. Whereas food resources, they grow slowly in arithmetic manner, 1 followed by 2, 2 followed by 3, 3 followed by 4, or here in this case 2, 4, 6, 8. So you can see the difference between geometric and arithmetic series. And here this is a simpler series, and the resource mismatch is in the factor of 2. It is a multiple of 2. But if the series keeps on growing, ये series और बड़ी हो जाती है, then this difference will be humongous. And this imbalance between the geometric and arithmetic ratio, this would lead to famine, disease, and wars. And according to Malthus, these are the positive checks that force any population back to a sustainable level. And he saw these outcome as nature's way of keeping the population in balance with available resources. Now the key principles. First, population it increased exponentially in geometric progression or geometric series GS, that is in multiple of 2, whereas the arithmetic the resources they grow in arithmetic manner, that is 2 followed by 4 by 6 and 8. So meaning here is population increases very fast, that is not kept up by the production of food resources. And here lies the mismatch, that a gap emerges between population and limited resources, which lead to misery, poverty, and many other conflictual and violent outcomes. And to keep the population, nature it brings in calamities and disasters such as famine, disease, war, and epidemics. And to thwart any natural attempt to keep the population in check, different culture they also have their own preventive checks, such as celibacy, delayed marriages, various marriage types, contraception, that keep the population in check. Now the limitation of this theory, first one is technological underestimation, that this theory it failed to anticipate agricultural revolution and scientific breakthroughs, not only the green revolution but even modern contraceptives, modern techniques such as IVF, surrogacy, test tube babies, designer babies. So all such technological advancement they have not been looked into. Then the second limitation, that this theory it neglects socio-economic factors, that various social structures, governance, distribution system, and market dynamics, they also have a lot of play in the availability of resources. Like you have seen the public distribution system of government of India. तो इसके थ्रू government it distribute stable grains at throwaway prices, especially to the poor. So ये एक dynamic है जिसके through survival of even the poor people can be ensured. So this thing, this socio-economic factor, these political factors, they have been neglected by this theory. Then the ethnocentric bias, that this study, it was primarily based in Western European society, and Western European society of especially of industrial revolution time. Now, the whole postulation, it ignored diverse reproductive strategies and survival adaptation of different indigenous and agrarian society. बहुत सारे कल्चर्स में अलग अलग टाइप की रिप्रोडक्टिव स्ट्रेटजीज हैं. So all of those contraceptive methods, they have not been looked into. And final limitation, that this theory, it is dismissive of human innovation, that it overlooks humanity's ability to innovate, redistribute, and adapt to resource constraints. So we have shown it time and again that whatever the disaster, the hiccup, the stopgap, the constraint or roadblock, whatever you name it, whenever we have come up against any such situation, any such pressing and testing situation, we innovated, we found a way. And this idea, this human behavior, it was totally overlooked in this theory. Now, the example of Bengal famine of 1943, the famous Bengal famine, which killed over 3 million people. So, some people have blamed overpopulation, but economist Amartya Sen, he argued that food was available, but it was because of British greed, British colonial policies, hoarding and mismanagement that led to starvation of people. Then there is another example which often dismisses or puts a limit on Malthusian theory. So, green revolution of India, it challenged Malthus' fears. Scientific evolution like high yielding seeds, fertilizer, machinery, they boosted food production, especially in Punjab and Haryana, and it prevented a food crisis which was feared by the Malthusian theory. Then the modern technologies and modern technological innovation also challenge Malthus' grim prediction. So innovations like lab-grown meat, vertical farming, and gene editing via CRISPR, and even precision agriculture. All of them, they expand food production in new ways. You might have heard about vertical farms in Singapore, where ये जो vertical farms है, even in on commercial building, household building, residential building, they can grow vegetables all year round. So this is human ingenuity that has found new way to grow resources, to expand resources with ever increased population. And such technological innovations, they have been ignored by Malthusian theory. Now the criticism. So critics like Susan George, she argued that hunger is less about food shortage and more about global inequality and exploitation. So her book, How the Other Half Died, it highlights how poverty and politics, they cause suffering. Now move on to the next theory. So the second theory is demographic transition theory. So this theory, it explains that population change because of social and economic progress. This concept was first introduced by Warren Thompson in 1929 and later refined by Frank Nordstein. This theory says that as countries modernize, as civilizations, as cultures modernize because of healthcare, education, urbanization, and industries, birth and death rate, they change. So when societies shift from farming to industrial economies, families, they start having fewer children. Now, key principle. So this demographic transition theory, it talks about 5 stages of population growth, starting with the first stage, that is of high stationary, in which both birth rate and death rate both are high, and because of that, population balance it out, and population growth is minimal. ये आप ऐसे समझ सकते हैं कि like if 10 uh, 10 children are being born, but 8 do not make it to the day. So 8 die. Because of that, we have a minimum population growth. Or ये वाली situation it was prevalent especially before the arrival of industrial revolution. क्योंकि उस time modern medicine वगैरह थी नहीं, and fertility it was usually high. Resources were abundant, but most of them were unexplored. And the most glaring problem faced at that time was the absence of medicines. So, because of that, death rate was also high. And finally, the outcome was minimal population growth. Now, the second stage was the stage of early expansion. Death rate they dropped due to medical and sanitation improvement that started around industrial revolution time, but the birth rate they remained high, which led to the instances of population explosion. You can see here कि 6 बच्चे पैदा हो रहे हैं, but because of medical and sanitation facilities, 4 are surviving, and the death rate is about 2. So every family it had spare children, or in other words, head count increased, and this led to the instance of population explosion. The third stage was the stage of late expanding, that birth rate they also began to decline with urbanization, female education and changing family norms. और death rate पहले से ही कम हो चुकी थी. So here, but still, birth rate was higher than today's standard. So again, अगर 3 बच्चे पैदा हो रहे हैं and one is dying, still every family had 2 or 3 children, 3 kids, 3 head counts. Now the fourth stage was low stationary, in which both birth and death rate they stabilize at low levels and population growth slows. In the final stage, stage 5, it is about declining or negative growth, that birth rate they fall below replacement level, and it causes population shrinkage. So replacement level it is about like two people, a couple, male and female, they are planning their families, and to make the to make up for the population they are replacing. क्योंकि out of the total head count available in the world, these two people they are replacing two people out of the total available pool of human head counts. So in that sense, 2.1 is usually considered the replacement level. In other words, हर एक family, a couple के 2 बच्चे हों. So this is how they are going to replace the population. Now, the limitations. First limitation is about Eurocentric model, that all of its study, all of its model, it is derived from European industrial experience, and they assume that all society follow the same linear path, which is not the case. हर एक society का अपना अलग अलग way है. Then it also ignore cultural specificities. ये इससे related है. So cultural specifications है होते हैं हर एक particular culture में, जो contraceptives हैं, जो fertility decisions हैं, जो family plannings हैं, they they are bound to vary from other cultures. But this generalization, this oversimplification, it has led to ignoring of such cultural specificities. Now the third limitation, that it fails to predict modern anomalies. So modern anomalies such as fertility rebounds or persistent high fertility in regions despite development. So such anomalies they have not been looked into, and they have not been addressed. Sufficient reasons have not been provided. And finally, it neglects migration. The migration जो है large scale migration, it is also shaping demographics. So such factor has not been looked into. Now the example, so India is a good example of how DDT works. After independence, when the British left us, and they left us in pauperized and resource scarce condition, India was a country of high birth rate and high infant death. So we were in stage one. But over time, with the introduction of family planning program, better education, urban growth, medical facilities, and sanitation, birth rate they started falling. And according to the latest National Family Health Survey, round 5th, NFHS 5, India's TFR, total fertility rate, it has dropped to 2.0, below the replacement level of 2.1. Now ये जो 2.1 ये वाला जो issue है, somebody might ask कि एक male and एक female है, and out of the uh, total pool available of the head count world over, they are replacing two people. So ऐसे केस में वो उनके अगर दो बच्चे हो जाएं, so they are providing the replacement. So why is it this replacement level, this total fertility level, it has been given in decimal? क्योंकि decimal में reproduction तो possible है नहीं. But actually the thing is, the first there are many factors that have not been counted into. पहला ये है, what is the guarantee that हर कपल के दोनों बच्चे दे विल बी ऑफ डिफरेंट जेंडर? क्योंकि अगर ऐसा हो कि हर कपल के दोनों बच्चे, एक डॉटर एंड एक सन, ये इस तरह से अगर रिप्रोडक्शन हो, इस तरह से फैमिली प्लानिंग हो, देन रिप्लेसमेंट लेवल जो है इट कैन अराइव एट 2.0. एंड नेक्स्ट थिंग इज, ऐसा भी ज़रूरी नहीं है कि हर एक कपल जो है वो दो ही बच्चे पैदा कर रहा है. Many go for 3 and 4 and more than that. Many couples they stop at having one kid, whether it is a son or daughter. And many couple they may suffer from infertility issue, or there may be another such issues, some religious, some cultural issues. So बहुत सारे couples जो हैं वो बच्चे नहीं करते या बच्चे नहीं हो पाते. So ऐसे में this 2.1, it is the average of statistical number of total fertility rate. Anyway, so according to NFHS data, India's TFR it has dropped to 2.0, below the replacement level of 2.1. So this means India has entered stage 4 of DDT. But this transition is uneven because many states such as Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, they are all still in the late expanding stage due to poverty, patriarchy, and low female education. Now, on the other hand, countries of South Asia, like Japan, Italy, South Korea, they face problem in the stage 5, that their population is shrinking and they are aging. So, for example, Japan's TFR it fell to 1.26 in 2023 due to long working hours, individualism, and weakening family values. And to tackle this, Japan introduced for incentives for marriage and childbirth. Now, the scholarly views. So modern scholars like Kingsley Davis and Arjun Appadurai, they argue that DDT it needs to evolve. And the first reason they have given, that falling fertility it does not mean that economic progress has been achieved, or it is a sign of economic progress. Falling fertility it can also show that there is a insecurity around climate fear, insecurity around economic woes. There may be infertility, there may be late marriages, or and people may not be having children. People are deliberately not having children. So all of these issues they have not been taken into account by DDT, and this whole phenomena, the graying of Asia, it is related to the falling fertility, the issue of falling fertility, in which people of Asia they are growing up, they are growing in age, but the replacement level it is not provided, which means replacement level children are not being produced. Now finally, in India, Supreme Court in 2023 it upheld women's reproductive rights, including abortion, and this thing it has not been predicted by DDT. Now the next theory, biological theories. So here, while demographic transition theory it gives a general idea of population change, anthropology it looks deeper at both biological and cultural factors that affect fertility and mortality. So biologically, factors like the age at which girls start menstruating, menarche, because it signifies the onset of puberty, and the age from which women can bear children. Then other factors such as nutrition, diseases, and genetic influences they also have bearing on population growth. So example here that Central Indian tribes such as Baiga and Gond tribe they have high fertility rate, partly due to cultural norms, but also because these Central India tribes they suffer from malnutrition and anemia. So it leads to high infant death. So to compensate for that, they usually resort to high fertility to have more children, so that अगर इनमें से अगर 5-6 बच्चे जो हैं ये पैदा कर रहे हैं उनमें से अगर 2 भी सर्वाइव कर जाते हैं, सो दिस दिस विल कॉम्पनसेट द हाई इन्फेंट डेथ. And the cultural factor that family structure, religion, and gender they also shape population pattern. So in the Toda tribe of Nilgiri, they practice polyandry and infanticide. So these two were the method they were that were early used to control population size. So polyandry it means having multiple male partners, multiple husband, and this was a way of keeping the population in check. And even after that, they used to resort to infanticide to kill children, to kill young children to control the population size. So you can see here the cultural factors in play. In contrast, Naga tribes they value large family because it signifies wealth and security. Now the principle of this biological theory that population growth and natural phenomena here fertility and mortality they are influenced by innate biological drives such as survival, reproduction, and aging. Second principle, natural fertility, that human like other species it possess a reproductive instinct that aimed at species survival. Third principle, mortality as a biological limitation. That mortality anywhere it stems from biological vulnerability to disease, aging, and environmental pressure. So it is there. Mortality is there, and we cannot escape from it. The next principle, carrying capacity and environmental limit. That population it is constrained by environment's biological capacity to support, which is also one of the principle that is shared by Malthusian theory. And next, evolutionary fitness and reproduction. That high fertility in human species, it ensures that species continue in face of environmental uncertainty. So these are various biological factors, the factors that influence fertility and mortality being listed in the principle of this theory. Now the limitations. First thing, biological reductionism. So this theory it oversimplifies complex social, cultural, and economic factors, and it often overlooks other technological and medical advances. Even it it has failed to taken into account economic factors as well. So other economic factors they can also influence fertility and mortality. Medical advancements such as IVF, surrogacy, they all other tools of modern healthcare, they can also reign against the issue of vulnerability to disease, the issue of mortality. So these factors, they have not been taken into account. Then gender and cultural insensitivity, that the biological factor, it neglects the role of patriarchy and gendered fertility choices. So patriarchy, that is a rule that signifies, that rule that prefers son, a male heir. Sometimes this may be a reason for having low fertility, or having fewer children, or even having female infanticide, a reason for female infanticide, which is not taken into account by biological theory. And finally, it is limited because it is a static model. It treats population as reactive rather than proactive, ignoring human agency and capacity for social change. So here, human society, a species as total, we keep leaping from and keep learning our lessons from one disaster to another. So our model, our species is dynamic one, whereas the biological theory, it is a static one. Then these theories, they don't fully explain complex society. So here in rural sub-Saharan Africa, high fertility is sometimes seen as a nature way of balancing high infant death rate, जो इंडिया में भी है, और जो जनरली जितने भी प्रिमिटिव सोसाइटीज़ हैं, जो पुअर सोसाइटी हैं, एंड ऑल सोसाइटी दैट एग्जिस्टेड बिफोर इंडस्ट्रियल रिवोल्यूशन, सब में यही था कि high fertility was necessary and it was accepted because death rate was high, infant death rate was high. So to make up the death, to make up for the mortality, high fertility was not only justified, but it also prescribed. Then there are many reasons, many cultural reasons, such as polygyny, multiple wives, the importance of lineage, and seeing children as social security. These factors, they have not been taken into account by biological explanation. Then the technology like contraceptives, IVF, surrogacy, they have also changed the old idea of natural fertility. Then the concept of biological carrying capacity, which is one of the principles of this theory, it has come into forefront recently because of the climate deluge, and the recent UNEP report of 2023, it warned that water shortages, resource depletion, and habitat loss. In short, the climate deluge, it can reintroduce the biological limit to population growth. But on this concept, many critics, they caution that the UNEP report and the placement of biological carrying capacity because of climate deluge, all these arguments, they can lead to instances of ecofascism. So ecofascism is the new way of blame game in which people blame poor population for environmental damage, while they ignore that the richest 10%, they consume nearly 50% of world resources. So अगर इसको दूसरे तरीके से देखें, so the biological carrying capacity, it is about resource extraction. अगर 10 लोग मिलके अगर एक आदमी जितना ही अगर खा रहे हैं और एक आदमी 10 लोगों जितना खा रहा है, so who is to be blamed? Who is more of a burden? Because as long as the population, it keeps itself bound up within the resource capacity, so any number of people will not be a problem. चाहे फिर 10 billion भी हो जाए, अगर people, they are moderate in their consumption, if people restrict their consumption to a level that it aligns with the resource carrying capacity of Earth, then Earth can sustain any number of people. But here the problem is only a few people, they are consuming a lot, and yet because of this new kind of racial eugenics, a new kind of blame game. They are blaming poor population for environmental damage. That these poor population, high, these poor people with high fertility, and those people who produce lot more children, they are a burden to environment, rather than seeing who is consuming more resources. And lastly, new technology like CRISPR gene editing, designer babies, they have also challenged the the whole concept of biological explanation. Now, let's proceed on to the fourth theories, cultural theories. So, cultural theory explained that population patterns like fertility, mortality, they are shaped by culture, values, and family system. And here, anthropologist John Caldwell, his wealth flow theory, it highlights that in many traditional society, children are seen as economic assets. For example, he studied the tribes of rural Nigeria and found that those Nigerian society, they favor having more children, because those children, they work on farm, took care of animals, and help with household tasks. So in such society, having many children is not a personal decision, it is a cultural and economic strategy. Now, the key principle of cultural theories: first, population behavior is shaped by cultural norms, values, and beliefs. And second, theory by Caldwell, the wealth flow theory, it says that high fertility persists in those society where children are economic assets. Then the pro-natalist and anti-natalist cultural pattern. So many cultural construction, they may encourage or discourage fertility based on lineage, continuity, prestige, and survival strategies. And final principle, marriage system and reproductive behavior. So practices like polygyny, early marriage, dowry, all of them, they impact fertility pattern beyond economic rationality. So all in all, ये जो लास्ट के दो principles हैं, they say that the cultural parameter, the cultural angle, it should not be overlooked, because they might be having uh, a different impact on fertility that might not have been explained by biological and social pattern. So ये डावरी की बात करते हैं, अब दहेज के कारण किसी लड़की की शादी नहीं हो रही. So here, biological and social factor, biological or any fertility and mortality pattern, they cannot take into account how dowry or how any such cultural pattern, they can have such influence on infertility and mortality. And this one, pro-natalist and anti-natalist cultural pattern. So both of them, they are about the child rearing practices. So cultural pattern here, it is about encouragement or discouragement of fertility. One issue which most of the Indian, they are familiar with, it is about son preference. So here, the preference of son, it may lead to encouragement of further delivery, further conception, further reproduction, or it may discourage further. Like if any family it has found male heir, they may stop having more children. बट कुछ कुछ में जब एक के बाद जब लड़कियां होती जाती है, 5-6 गर्ल्स हो जाती है, फिर भी दे कीप हैविंग चिल्ड्रन इन द होप दैट द नेक्स्ट विल बी अ सन, द मेल आयर. So here encouragement and discouragement can be seen in full play. Now the limitations of cultural theory. First is cultural determinism. That if you overemphasize culture, it may downplay other factors, economic, political, and technological influence on population behavior. Second limitation is about difficulty in generalization, that cultural beliefs are diverse, fluid, and context specific. So a universal model cannot be looked into. जैसे ये देखा है कि मोस्ट जो South Asian society, South Asian and Southeast Asian, all of them they prefer sun. Whereas if you see the nature of African society, African tribal, they prefer having more hands. So here they are they are not particular about any gender. So in that sense, you cannot make any global theory, global cultural theory, or global cultural generalization about fertility issue. Then it underestimate individual agency. So this uh, theory it assumes that people usually conform to such cultural norms passively, but there might be some resistance and some negotiation within communities. And finally, it was limited in explaining rapid demographic transition. So, in in a few society, in a dynamic time, there may be sudden fertility decline or mortality shift, and all of these factors they cannot be answered by such cultural practices because culture it is more about a shroud, a cover, or you can say uh, it's like a common thing which is usually accepted by people, but it is not the case that nature itself, the time, the environment itself, it conforms to cultural norm. It is not the way. Now the example, so cultural theories, they are they show that fertility and population pattern are influenced by cultural norms. So in the Tharus of Nepal, sons are preferred because they carry forward the family name, they manage property and perform death ritual. And similarly, Melvin Goldstein, he researched in Tibet and highlighted that fraternal polyandry. It was practiced there where brother they share a common wife, and this was one of the way to control population growth. Because if the issue is a is obverse of polygyny, in which one man having multiple wives, in that case, this practice is usually preferred to have more children, one man and multiple women. Polygyny is one of the cultural way to increase the population, and the opposite of it is polyandry. In that sense, one woman is shared by many men, and here you can see how a cultural response keep population in check. Next, the sun preference seen in India and China is another cultural pattern that shape demographics. And despite economic progress, NFHS 5 data showed that rich states like Haryana and Punjab they are driven by desire for male heirs, and this has resulted in sex selective abortions and missing girls, a term popularized by Amartya Sen. So this is not a new issue that these two rich states they they go via this cultural practice, this preferring son, and because of that, they usually prefer female infanticide. And this practice it has led to having a very low gender ratio in these two states. Next, the issue of climate and global anxiety they also shaping cultural attitudes. So the movements like birth strike, so birth strike is a movement where people refuse to have children due to environmental issues. It is a new cultural shift in terms of population pattern. And likewise social media, art, surrogacy and LGBTQ family they are also redefining norms around fertility and family structure. Now let's have a look at the role of migration, urbanization, and subsequently emerging demographic realities. So, migration, a cultural and economic impact. So, migration is not only an economic need but also a cultural one. And here, Michael Cernia's IRR model it explained how big project like dam or mining they uproot people, making them landless and culturally marginalized. So this IRR model, it is a study of how big projects they impact any population. So many parameters are there like joblessness, homelessness, marginalization, cleansing, etc. So this model, it is about it has a bearing on how many such progress they make people to migrate from one place to another. That is, a issue of migration and displacement. And such example, the first one of about Sardar Sarovar Dam, where thousands of Adivasis they lost their land and tradition, and it sparked a new model, the new movement known as Narmada Bachao Andolan, led by Medha Patkar. And this forced migration, it also happens due to ethnic and religious violence. And so the two examples of Rohingya crisis and Manipur conflict, both of them, they show how persecution turned people into stateless and alienated groups. Now, the role of COVID-19 in India's migrant crisis. So the 2020 COVID-19 lockdown, they expose how vulnerable India's 40 crore internal migrants are. So when the whole of India was locked down, so these people they were stranded and they remained jobless. In that situation, all of them, most of them, they walked back to their villages. It was the worst migrant crisis since partition. Then, on the issue of female migrant, they also suffered the most because they lost the job, they faced violence, and they remain invisible in data. And this pandemic has also shifted national attention to migrant rights and welfare gaps because these people, they they were people of nowhere. They had not, they were not on data. They did not have any social security, did not have any ration card, did not have any such amenities that can help them stay in the cities in which they were looking for jobs. Now, the role of urbanization. So, India's cities they are growing fast and projected to cross 50% urban population by 2050. But this does not benefit everyone equally. So, global cities theory it says that metro cities like Mumbai and Bengaluru that are powered by uh, these migrants, by footloose labor, by people who are living in slums without any social security, living precarious life, but yet they are pumping up the economies of these metro cities. So these rich cities they have huge slums like Dharavi, where over a million people live without basic services. But these people also power the 1 billion informal industries. And the many coveted projects like smart cities, they are there to cater to the elites, and this causes gentrification. So gentrification is the process where some low class neighborhoods they are turned into a more affluent class, more affluent societies like building complexes, apartments, residential societies. So, in another way, to turn any low neighborhood into a high class society, this process is known as gentrification. And this this process it is often there to cater to the elite because उस जगह पे जो अपार्टमेंट्स रेजिडेंशियल सोसाइटीज कॉम्प्लेक्सेस जो भी तैयार किए जाते हैं दे आर देयर टू accommodate rich people. गरीब लोग तो कॉम्प्लेक्स में रहेंगे नहीं. And one such instance was the eviction drive in Delhi's Yamuna floodplains. And this was also another issue of gentrification in which the this this development model it led to displacement of thousands and millions of people. Now let's have the uh, role of climate change and migration. So, climate change has become a powerful global force that drives migration, creating millions of climate refugees. So, case studies in Asia, Bangladesh stands as a critical hotspot from climate migration. So, as per 2022 IPCC report, South Asia is one of the most vulnerable regions globally. And Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh, it already receives 500,000 climate migrants annually because Bangladesh, it stands, it is situated near the coast. So, because of climate change and the subsequent rising sea level and frequent floods, many people they are fleeing their homeland. Many people of Southeast Asia they are fleeing their coastal areas to take refuge in Dhaka. Now, another instance of the Lake Chad Basin in Africa. So, this lake, a form of freshwater lake, it has shrunk by 90% due to drought, overuse, and climate change. And this loss of livelihood, it has worsened poverty and fueled violent conflict, often including the rise of Boko Haram. So Boko Haram is a proscribed terrorist organization in the the African region, and you can see how climate stress, climate deluge, they can trigger wider social and political instability. Next case study is about California's wildfire. So these wildfire, which has burned for last 5 or 6 years, they have burned over 4 million acres and displacing thousands of families. Towns like Paradise, they were completely wiped off the map. The next case study is the Pacific island nation of Kiribati. So, because of rising sea level, this island it faced an existential crisis, and for that matter, it has already purchased land in Fiji because if the D-Day comes when it needs permanent relocation, it should be ready for that. And coupled with it, because of rising sea level, salt water intrusion, जो जो समंदर का पानी है, it has intruded the agricultural land. So because of that, land becomes infertile, and frequent king tides they also flood homes and infrastructure. And all of these phenomena they are traced to climate change. The next issue is about gig economy and the new urban precariat. So precariat, the word it means having job insecurity, or in other words, not having secure jobs, not having predictable job. So you can call it job insecurity or job unpredictability. So here, the rise of digital platform like Swiggy, Uber, they have birthed new form of migration. So according to Jan Bremen, these footloose labor, they are performing essential services without any legal recognition. And the 2023 World Bank report it notes that India's gig workforce it has crossed 23 million, which is dominated by migrants from UP, Bihar, Odisha, Jharkhand, the poorer state. And these workers they they work day long, but still they are excluded from formal social security net such as inclusion of PPF, having medical benefit, having service benefit, having healthcare benefit. So these people they have been excluded from all formal labor rights. They are not these gig workers. They are not even included as labor. So no social security, no medical healthcare benefits, no PPF, and no other social recognitions are given to them. Now, the next topic: population policies, ethics, and future of demographic thinking. So, population policies has been a battleground where state interests, individual rights, and global narratives on sustainability all of them collide. So, the population policies they range from Malthusian fear of population explosion, having high population, to modern day debates on population implosion. Implosion means to shrinking population. Now, the key principle here that population policies are state-led intervention that are designed to influence population pattern. Then these policies can range from coercive, An example is forced sterilization to incentive based, where various incentives such as cash transfer, family planning programs are given, and the modern one, the right based approach, where reproductive freedom, education, and health access, they are also um, arrive on the horizon to influence these policy decisions. And final principle, the ethics of population control, it revolves around safeguarding individual rights, bodily autonomy, informed consent, and equitable access. और इनमें से अगर कोई प्रिंसिपल आपको समझ में नहीं आया हो, then you can drop a comment. Now the limitation, first, such population policies, they have been historically misused because of coercion. So many forced sterilization, gender biases, and targeting of minorities happen. Then these population policies, they overemphasize fertility reduction while ignoring social and economic structure that drive population growth. So अगर डायरेक्ट जो रूट है उसको अगर देखा जाए तो it is the poverty, the lack of education, the absence of healthcare with this which drive high fertility. So if these roots are catered to, then such structural parameters on reduction of fertility, they may not be um, resorted to. Then the third limitation, the global north versus global south divide in population policies. So it is generally assumed that global north is the place of rich and educated people, whereas global south is a land of uneducated people who need population policies. ऐसा माना जाता है कि global north, they also already be population which have understood all the parameters and they have kept it to themselves, whereas global south, it must control its population. So all these divides, they perpetuate these neo-Malthusian fear that it is the population of global south that would outcompete the resources, while the clear fact is being ignored that it is about resource extraction. The head count does not matter. It is about resource extraction. So it is the individuals, it is the people of global north that are consuming more than what the rest of the population of global south consume in a year. So this parameter, it is not, or it is often overlooked. Now case study. So first case study is about India's family planning trajectory. So India, it became the first country to launch a national family program in 1952, just the time when the constitution came into picture. And uh, this family planning program of that time, it focused on voluntary contraception. But by the 1970s, fear of population explosion, they pushed the government towards coercive methods. Coercive methods means force methods. So the worst example was during the emergency period of the reign of Indira Gandhi, when over 6 million people, mostly from poor and lower caste group, they were forcibly sterilized. Then, after the backlash, India shifted to target-free approach in 1990s, that is, promoting family planning without coercion. But then, newer challenges they appeared. So, the patriarchal norm and son preference, it led to misuse of ultrasound technology and sex-selective abortion. And to stop this, to address this problem, the government passed the PCP Acts, the Preconception and Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Act. So इस एक्ट के ज़रिए जो USG अल्ट्रासाउंड टेक्नोलॉजी होती है, जिसमें पता चलता है कि फीटस जो है मेल या फीमेल है, और जनरली ये जो स्टेट्स हैं हरियाणा, पंजाब एंड मोस्ट ऑफ द स्टेट्स ऑफ हिंदी हार्टलैंड, दे यूजुअली टेक रिसोर्ट टू द प्रैक्टिस ऑफ फीमेल इन्फेंटिसाइड. जब पता चल जाता है कि अल्ट्रासाउंड में गर्ल है, देन वो अबॉर्शन करवा लेते हैं. सो इन सब के लिए ये एक्ट तो लाया गया है, बट कन्विक्शन is very low. And here The main culprits are patriarchal norms and son preference. Now the second case study is about China. So here again, the Malthusian fear of overpopulation, it led to the forced population control methods by the name One China policy. Then, uh, as anthropologist Suzanne Greenhalgh points out, that people were reduced to numbers, leading to forced abortion, sterilization, and huge gender imbalance. Then, by 2020, China faced serious problems: a shrinking workforce, an aging population, and millions of missing girls. And realizing this, China ended the policy and now allow up to 3 children per family. और यहाँ पे भी आप इशू देख सकते हैं कि जब वन चिल्ड्रन अगर एक ही बच्चा अगर पैदा कर सकते हैं तो एंड चाइना अगेन a country that practices the patriarchal norms and son preference. So generally USG का फिर misuse तो होगा ही. And finally, a shift towards rights-based approach. So the modern population policies, they embrace reproductive rights, women's empowerment, and choice-based framework. And here, India's National Population Policy 2000, it embodies this shift, emphasizing universal education, reduction of infant and maternal mortality, access to contraceptives and reproductive health care, and delaying age of marriage and first childbirth. But yet, the NFHS data show that rising female sterilizations are rising, but male vasectomy, that is male way of contraception, male way of sterilization, it has a low uptake. क्योंकि यहाँ पे माना जाता है बिकॉज ऑफ पैट्रियार्कल नॉर्म्स कि जो आदमी है वो ही शुड नॉट परफॉर्म सच कॉन्ट्रासेप्टिव सर्जरीज क्योंकि उसकी ज़रूरत हो सकती है जनरली एज अ वे ऑफ सेइंग दैट it is ignoring female authority over their reproductive rights and giving more primacy to male. So because of that, there is an imbalance between who is going to sterilize first. Now, the previous few questions explain the relevance of demographic transition theory in understanding population growth, discuss the role of biological and socio-cultural factor influencing fertility in tribal society, critically examine the impact of cultural belief and practices on population policies, and finally, short notes on Malthusian theory, demographic transition theory, and population explosion. So this is it. Thank you very much, and kindly subscribe the channel and promote it to your friends and peers. And if there is any doubt, just drop in comments. Thank you again.